the moose who carried the forest. In the vast wilderness of Pineheart Forest lived Magnus, a massive bull moose whose antlers stretched wide as ancient oak branches and whose strength was legendary throughout the woodland. For as long as anyone could remember, Magnus had been the forest's problem solver, the one everyone turned to when tasks seemed impossible or dangers too great to face alone. It had started innocently enough years ago, when Magnus was a young moose eager to prove his worth. A family of rabbits had been trapped when a fallen tree blocked their burrow entrance, and Magnus had easily lifted the massive log aside. Word spread quickly about his incredible strength and generous spirit, and soon other animals began asking for his help with their own challenges. Magnus loved feeling useful and needed. When the deer couldn't reach the high apple branches, he would shake the trees with his antlers. When beavers needed help moving particularly large logs for their dams, Magnus would drag them across the forest floor. When the stream became clogged with debris after spring floods, he would wade in and clear the blockages with his powerful hooves and antlers. Over the years, however, something had changed in the forest's relationship with Magnus. What began as grateful requests had transformed into casual expectations. Animals no longer asked if he could help. They simply informed him what needed to be done. "Magnus," called Hazel the squirrel one morning, barely looking up from her acorn sorting. "The storm last night knocked branches all over the path to the oak grove. We need you to clear it before noon, so we can gather food." Before Magnus could respond, Fletcher the fox trotted up with his own demand. "The river stones shifted again, and we can't get across to the berry patches. Come move them back into place. And don't forget," added Rosie the rabbit, "you promised to help us dig new winter storage tunnels today. We've already marked where we want them." Magnus felt his shoulders sag under the weight of everyone's expectations, but he nodded dutifully. "Of course, I'll start with the path, then the river, then the tunnels." As he trudged toward the oak grove, Magnus noticed Chippy the chipmunk watching him with concerned eyes. "Magnus," Chippy said quietly, "you look tired. When was the last time you had a full day to just rest and graze peacefully?" Magnus paused, realizing he couldn't remember. "I'm fine, Chippy. The forest needs me. I'm the only one strong enough to handle these tasks." "But what about—" Chippy began. "I really need to get started," Magnus interrupted, already walking away. "Everyone's counting on me." The situation grew worse when Bramble the porcupine arrived in the forest that autumn. Bramble was a traveler who had seen many woodland communities, and he was shocked by what he observed in Pineheart Forest. "Excuse me," Bramble said politely to a group of animals lounging in the afternoon sun while Magnus labored nearby. "Shouldn't some of you be helping him with that heavy work?" The animals looked at Bramble as if he had suggested something absurd. "Help Magnus?" laughed Fletcher. "Why would we do that? He's much stronger than any of us. It would take 20 of us to do what he can do in minutes." "Besides," added Hazel, "he's been doing this work for years. He's good at it." Bramble watched Magnus strain to uproot a massive fallen tree that was blocking a stream, working alone while dozens of capable animals relaxed nearby. "But surely everyone could contribute something." "Look, newcomer," Rosie interrupted, "this is how our forest works. Magnus handles the big jobs, and we handle our own small tasks. It's efficient." But Bramble noticed what the others had become blind to. Magnus moved more slowly than he once had. His magnificent antlers hung lower with exhaustion. His eyes, once bright with enthusiasm, now held a weary resignation. As winter approached, the demands on Magnus only increased. Animals wanted their shelters winterized. Food stores moved to safer locations, and pathways cleared before the first heavy snows. Magnus worked from dawn until well past dusk, barely taking time to eat or rest. Elder birch, an ancient tree whose roots had witnessed generations of forest life, watched Magnus's decline with growing concern. "Young moose," the tree whispered through rustling leaves one evening as Magnus collapsed beneath his branches. You cannot carry the entire forest on your antlers forever. But if I don't help them, who will? Magnus replied wearily. They depend on me. And what happens to them when you can no longer help anyone? Elder Birch asked gently. Magnus didn't have an answer. The crisis came with the first major winter storm, a howling blizzard that struck earlier and harder than anyone had predicted. As the wind roared and snow piled rapidly, emergencies erupted throughout the forest simultaneously. The rabbit warrens were flooding from melting snow, backing up drainage channels. A family of young deer had become trapped on the wrong side of a rapidly rising creek. The squirrels' winter food cache was buried under a fallen tree, threatening their survival. The beaver dam had broken under pressure from ice flows, threatening to flood the entire lower forest. Every group of animals sent messengers to Magnus, expecting him to solve their individual crisis immediately. Magnus, called the rabbit messenger through the storm, our homes are flooding. You need to dig new drainage channels right now. No, Magnus, shouted the deer messenger. Our fawns will freeze if you don't get them across the creek first. The food cache emergency is most urgent, insisted the squirrel messenger. Magnus looked at the desperate messengers, then at the multiple disasters visible through the swirling snow. For the first time in his life, he realized the impossible truth. There was more work than even he could handle, and everyone expected him to be in multiple places at once. But Magnus tried anyway. He rushed first to the rabbit warrens, working frantically to dig drainage channels in the frozen ground. Then he raced to the flooded creek, attempting to build a bridge while the current grew stronger. Next, he struggled to lift the massive tree off the squirrel's food supply, his strength already depleted from the previous tasks. As he strained to move the fallen tree, Magnus felt something give way inside his chest. The world spun, his legs buckled, and the mighty moose collapsed in the snow, his breath coming in painful gasps. The squirrels stared in shock at their fallen helper. For the first time, they realized that Magnus wasn't indestructible. He was just a living creature who had been pushed beyond his limits. Word of Magnus's collapse spread quickly through the storm. Animals throughout the forest faced a terrifying reality. Their problems still needed solving, but the one individual they had relied on for everything was no longer able to help them. At first, panic set in. The rabbits wailed that they would all drown. The deer cried that their young would freeze. The squirrels despaired about winter starvation. But then something remarkable happened. Chippy the chipmunk, who had long watched Magnus's exhaustion with concern, stood up in the swirling snow. Magnus can't save us this time, Chippy declared, but that doesn't mean we're helpless. We just need to work together like we should have been doing all along. Bramble the porcupine nodded approvingly. In other forests I've visited, everyone contributes to community work. We can do the same here. For the first time in years, the forest animals began cooperating instead of depending on one individual. The rabbits organized teams to take turns digging drainage channels. What would have taken Magnus an hour took them most of the night. But they succeeded. The deer worked together to build a snow ramp that allowed the trapped family to escape to safety. The squirrels, the elk, and other animals combined their efforts to move the fallen tree, discovering that many working together could accomplish what had seemed impossible for individuals. Most importantly, they took shifts caring for Magnus, bringing him food, keeping him warm, and allowing him to rest completely for the first time in years. When Magnus finally recovered several days later, he found a transformed forest. Animals were still helping each other with various tasks, sharing responsibilities they had previously dumped entirely on him. "Magnus," Hazel called cheerfully, but this time her tone was different. "We're so glad you're feeling better. Would you like to help us with the final cleanup from the storm? We've already cleared most of the debris, but we could use your strength for a few of the biggest pieces." "We've organized work teams," added Fletcher, "so no one animal has to do everything alone anymore." Magnus looked around at the busy, cooperative forest community and felt something he hadn't experienced in years: lightness. The crushing weight of everyone's expectations had been lifted from his shoulders. "I'd be happy to help," Magnus said, and for the first time in a long time, he truly meant it. Chippy scampered up to sit on Magnus's antler. "How does it feel to be part of a team instead of being the whole team?" Magnus considered this as he watched rabbits, deer, squirrels, and other animals working side by side on various projects. "It feels like I can actually help because I want to, not because I have to." Elder birch rustled approvingly in the breeze. "A healthy forest grows when every tree, every plant, every creature contributes what they can. When one tree tries to be the entire forest, both the tree and the forest suffer." From that winter forward, Pineheart Forest operated on a new principle. Magnus remained one of the strongest and most capable animals, but he was no longer expected to solve every problem alone. When major tasks arose, teams formed naturally. When emergencies occurred, multiple animals responded with different skills and abilities. Magnus discovered that helping others felt completely different when he chose to contribute rather than being expected to carry everything. His strength returned, his spirit brightened, and his relationships deepened as other animals got to know him as a friend, rather than just a service provider. And when young animals in the forest showed exceptional talents or abilities, the older animals made sure to teach them an important lesson. Magnus had learned the hard way. Being gifted with special abilities means you have something wonderful to offer the world, but it doesn't mean you must sacrifice yourself to meet everyone else's expectations. The forest had learned that true community strength comes not from one individual carrying everyone else, but from everyone carrying each other. Moral: those who give without limits will eventually have nothing left to give. True community requires everyone to contribute.